We are learning sobering new details about what President Trump initially knew about the coronavirus and when he knew it. According to a new book by Bob Woodward, the president knew of the dangers of the virus weeks before the first death in the U.S. Instead of warning the American people, the president decided to play the virus down. Woodward recorded two separate conversations he had with the president for the book, one from February, the other from March. Here is some of what the president told him, as obtained by CNN.
It goes through air, Bob. That's always tougher than the touch. You know, the touch, you don't have to touch things, right? But the air, you just breathe the air, and that's how it's passed. And so that's a very tricky one. That's a very delicate one. It's also more deadly than your strenuous flus. This is more deadly. This is 5 per. This is 5% versus 1% and less than 1%. So this is deadly stuff. Well, I think, Bob, really, to be honest with you,
sure, I want you to.
I wanted to always play it down. I still like playing it down.
Yes,
because I don't want to create a panic.
Let's bring in Jacqueline Alemany now. She's a political reporter and author of the Power Up newsletter for the Washington Post. Jackie, welcome. Great to have you with us. So since this news broke, you tweeted a video showing 54 times that President Trump downplayed the coronavirus. How had the White House been defending that in the past, and how do these tapes impact that?
Well, look, what we see here is a pattern that reporters have been drawing out from the administration's handling of the coronavirus pandemic since February. But what these tapes really confirm on the record, in Trump's own words, is that there is a disparity between what the president knew in private, what his administration knew in private, and what the president was conveying to the American public throughout his handling of the pandemic and throughout his refusal to fully mobilize the federal government in order to tackle this problem, even as he knew and was getting intel, as he told Bob Woodward, that he was hearing from people like President Xi and getting information that the virus was very deadly. On January 28th, the Post first reported that that's when Trump's national security advisor, Robert O'Brien, warned the president that this pandemic would be the roughest thing that he would ever face in his presidency. Woodward and the president spoke a week after that, February 7th, where Trump disclosed this information and also added that he had received information from President Xi. Yet the rest of the month of February, what Woodward deems a lost month in terms of handling the coronavirus pandemic, the president insisted that the country was at a very low risk, that the virus would simply disappear, and continued to make comments that really, again, downplayed the virus. And as really you can see in that video that the Post compiled of the 54 different times that he downplayed the virus, despite what the White House press secretary, Kayleigh McEnany, claimed during the White House briefing today, that the president was simply trying to remain calm and assure the public that things were going to be okay, and that in fact he wasn't misleading the public. But Woodward's account really shows that that's just not the case.
And there is a lot coming out from Woodward's reporting in his new book beyond just what we're learning about the president's handling of the pandemic. Woodward also says that President Trump revealed the existence of a secret new nuclear weapons system. He says this was later confirmed by anonymous sources who were surprised the president disclosed it. How significant is that?
We are still reaching out to our sources right now to try to gain more information on this pretty shocking development ourselves. But I think what it underscores is what we've known about this president over the past few years of his administration. A very relaxed an approach to the intelligence community and intelligence in general that concerns a lot of national security types, including his own advisors, current and former, who have expressed dismay with the way the president handles classified information and how he discloses it very cavalierly to either authoritarian leaders who he has deemed his friends, which Woodward also details throughout the book, or to reporters in conversations that intelligence officials are later surprised by. But it's pretty jarring when the administration is actively trying to shield information from getting to Democrats on the Hill, and preventing, the transmission of classified information with regards to Russian interference in the election, but then is on the phone with Bob Woodward disclosing pretty big news that the U.S. has developed a new nuclear weapons system.
And Jackie, Woodward also repeatedly questioned the president about the nationwide protests for racial justice this summer following the police killing of George Floyd. What did the president have to say about those?
Yeah, Tanya, that's a really interesting conversation that Woodward details as well. As you just noted, there are 18 different on-the-record interviews that the two had together that are taped. Woodward says to Trump that the two have more in common than they realize. They're both white and of privilege. And the president responds to Woodward saying that he's really drank the Kool-Aid and that he doesn't see things that way and doesn't necessarily agree with Woodward's assessment that as men of white privilege, that they owe the African-American community support, especially from the federal government. I think that that claim is not necessarily surprising, but especially startling coming after the Republican National Convention, where there was a series of speakers who explicitly said that the president cared about Black voters, that he was not racist. All of these validators who came out to try to bolster the president's flagging numbers with African-American voters. I think what it also really underscores is just how transactional Trump views his relationships with voters. He also says to Woodward that he's shown the Black community a lot of love and he doesn't get anything back. The president has time and time again shown that he believes that, his position when he does things for certain communities, that in return he is owed some sort of political reward or electoral support.
And Jackie, Woodward also spoke with several current and former members of the Trump administration. How did they, in general, describe their interactions with the president?
That's exactly right. He spoke with former DNI Director Dan Coats, who was an Indiana senator and pretty close with the Vice President Mike Pence. He also has conversations from sources of things that his former Defense Secretary Jim Mattis told him, saying that the president had no moral compass. He details this pretty grim scene of Mattis going to the Washington Cathedral to say a prayer for the president and saying that his moral compass was so concerning that he was praying for the country and for the government and told Coates that they thought that they might have to take things at some point into their own hands. All of this, I think, sort of buttresses a lot of the, reporting that we've seen from The Atlantic and from all of the media outlets that confirm the Atlantic's reporting about the president's relationship with the military. Many of his military and national security advisors who expressed, a deep concern for the president and the president's loathing of them in return. He goes on the record here and is pretty disparaging of the military, which his administration just really spent the last week denying. So I think that all of these comments really could put the president in even deeper of a hole. But again, I think it's really worth noting that the president has publicly disparaged veterans before, but it is eye-opening when you have officials now sourced, by name as saying some of these things.
Jacqueline Alemany, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.